Hi, I'm Jeff Troxel from the University of Montana's Jazz Studies Department, and I'm going to continue the topic on comping styles for guitar. So earlier we did the Charleston and swing rhythms, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bossa Nova style. So to do that, I'm going to be using shell voicings. And there's a shell voicing video that you can reference if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about now. So I'm going to start with this D minor 7 chord, which is third finger on the left hand on the 5th string, 5th fret, and then my first finger at the 3rd fret of the 4th string, and then my pinky on the 5th fret of the 3rd string. And with the right hand, I'm playing the notes with my thumb, index, and middle finger. I'm dividing the hand into two parts. The thumb is going to act independently of these two fingers, which will act together. So when I play the D minor 7 chord, I get this sound. And I want to think of that chord, I think of chords as being like a little mini choir. So this is, in this case, a 3-voice choir. And I want to make sure I can hear all the parts. I don't want the bass sticking out. I don't want the tenors to be left behind. So I want to make sure I can hear all the notes equally like this. Okay. So our preparatory exercise to start the Bossa Nova is going to be this. I'm going to start with the thumb and the fingers down on the strings. And I'm going to start with just the thumb. It plays as these two fingers remain in place. So this is beat 1. And then on the and of 1, I'm going to fire these two fingers like this. So I have this. And then on beat 2, I'm going to bring all the fingers down together. And when you're first learning this, you might even make a little percussive sound with it like this. And as I do that, I also release pressure with the left hand, so I create some separation in the sound. Now eventually the percussive thing is going to disappear. We're going to use that motion to help keep time. We're going to feel that, but we're going to try not to hear that any more than we have to. We don't want it getting in the way of the drums or anything like that. So this is our first exercise. It's going to be 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Now the next part of this is I'm just going to add one thing to this pattern. I'm going to do the thumb, fingers, come down, and then on the and of 2, I'm going to fire the two fingers without the thumb. So I have 1 and 2 and. Very important that the thumb doesn't come up with the fingers. That's why we want to keep them separate. So again, it's 1 and 2 and. And then as I repeat that, as I play the thumb, these fingers are going to come in at exactly the same time. So that's the basis for this Bossa Nova rhythm. I'm going to add one thing to it now to create a 2-measure rhythm pattern. And the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate beat 1 from the rest of the measure. So on beat 1, I'm going to do a pinch where all the fingers play at the same time. So it's 1, and then I'm going to hold that through the entire beat. Then I'm going to come in on beat 2 with all the fingers touching the string, that little percussive thing. And then I start the pattern from there. So it's 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4. So the second end of the second measure is a little bit, I'm just doing a 3, 4. And to get that last note short, rather than come in with my right hand to do it, I'm going to release the pressure on the left hand. Like that. That creates that short sound. So the rhythm is 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and, let me say that again. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. So it sounds like this. 3, 4. And I'm going going to back off a little bit on the percussive part of it, but I'm still going to feel it. I'm still going to touch the strings, but I'm just not going to try to make it where you can hear it. So that's basically a two-measure bossa nova pattern that you can take and you can play over any bossa nova with that. There's a ton of variations that we can learn, but that will get you started. And the tactile approach of bringing the fingers in on beats 2 and 4 will really help you to lock in the rhythm. So let's do one more thing with this before we move on to trying to play it in a song. Actually, maybe two more things. The first thing I'm going to do is figure out, since it's a two-measure pattern, I might have what happens when I have a chord change, just moving to another chord. Well, if I have a chord change within the measure, what's going to happen is the new chord, I'm going to anticipate the new chord on the and of 2 with these 2 fingers, but the thumb is going to hold steady on the bass. So the thumb is basically playing 1 and 3, 1, 3. And then, so if I'm playing from D minor 7 to a G7, like this, here's how that would sound. 2, 3, 4. New chord with these 2 fingers, then the thumb on the beat. So it's back, back again. So that's a basic bossa nova pattern. I'm going to add one more thing to it, and then we're going to put it into a song. So the next thing I'm going to do is when I have a chord like D minor 7 that has its root on the 5th string, I can do an alternating bass thing where I move from this root of the chord here down to the 5th of the chord here, and it just creates a little more interest in the part. So it sounds like this: 2, 3, 4. Now when I have a chord with a root on the 6th string, I could do the same thing if I wanted to. I'd have to finger it a little bit differently. But for now, let's just not worry about that. I think we've got enough motion going on if I just use the 5th string roots as my alternating bass. Shell voicings typically don't have a 5th in the chord. So what I'm doing when I go to the alternating bass note is I'm adding a 5th to this D minor 7 chord. Which means if I usually use this chord for minor 7, and when it's a shell voicing, I can also use it for minor 7 flat 5. But because now I'm adding a 5th, if I'm going to play over D minor 7 flat 5, I've got to lower that 5th by a half step. That makes the flat 5. So the minor 7 flat 5 would be. Okay, so now let's put this whole thing that we've got going on, let's put it into a tune. And this is a familiar tune to a lot of people. This is a tune called Blue Bossa. And I'm going to play that bossa nova pattern that we just learned. I'm going to be using some alternating bass notes in this song, and with just those things that we've talked about. I'm not adding anything new beyond what we've already discussed. You're going to hear a part that's pretty fully developed. It's got a lot of stuff going on. So here it is. It's in the key of C minor, and it goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's Blue Bossa, and if you were playing behind a horn player or a singer or someone else that was doing the melody part of that, you be giving them a lot of support with that part that you've already got going on. One thing about this part, the way that we're playing it right now though, is that I'm being both the piano with these two fingers, and I'm being the bass player with my thumb. So the piano, I'm going to stay out of the way of the piano with this pattern because it's a predictable rhythmic pattern that repeats. And so when I'm playing like this, the piano will often be doing some other kind of thing, a montuna, or playing more a more busy part, because they know what I'm doing rhythmically, and they can find a way to stay out of my way that way. We can play together at the same time in a bossa pattern, where with the swing pattern we have to be a lot more careful. Now, but the bass player is another issue. If I'm playing with a bass player, I don't really want to be doing this. That's the bass's role, and I'm going to be in the way if I'm doing that. So what I would do is I would still feel that pattern, but I'm going to mostly focus on these two fingers now, and I might feather some things with the bass just to keep my time until I really know this rhythm, and I can stay out of the way like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you notice as I'm doing that the shell voicings, we're starting to see the limitations of them, right? They sound pretty stark. So now, when I'm playing like this, it would be time to add some other notes to the chords, like maybe a 9 to the C minor and the F minor, and maybe some of those other things. You can still see the shells on the bottom of this, so they become the parent chords for these bigger chords. But with that in mind, if I were to play this with a bass player, I might play something like this. 2, 3, 4. If you were watching carefully, you saw that my thumb was still playing, but I was being really soft with it, and I wasn't worrying about any of the alternating stuff. Just being soft, just enough to keep the time, but really trying to bring the piano part, the finger part of it out so that it was a little bit more pronounced, and pull that bass back so that it leaves room for the actual bass player to play that groove. I can also play that same groove if I'm strumming, if I want a little bit more of a brushed sound. But I want to make sure when I'm playing in this kind of a style that my sound blends into the tapestry of the whole groove. So I don't want to be really loud with a ringing sound. I'm going to probably, with a pick, pull my volume back just a little bit. And then I can hear, I want the guitar to sound as acoustic as possible. So then I get this kind of a sound. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be a nice way to play if you were in a bigger band with a lot of horns, maybe a big band or a smaller combo that had horns, and you were wanting to come out just a little bit more with the drums. The finger thing can be pretty soft. It's a nice thing to do in an intimate setting. The pick is maybe a better approach if you're playing with a lot more people. And then finally, I've just got a couple of variations on this bossa nova pattern that you can do that are similar to what we just played, but just to show you that there are some other ways to play it. There's a bunch of variations. This is not exhaustive by any means. But I'll just play, I'm just going to go back to my D minor chord, a D minor 9, and I'm just going to play these two variations. The first one sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the length of the time that I hold the chords has a lot to do with the groove. It's just not just where I attack, but also where I release. So pay attention, if you look at the written part, pay attention to where we have the staccato marks and try to bring out the sound of that chord. And finally, here's one more variation on the bossa. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there you have it, a quick primer on the bossa nova. I hope you find this useful, and I hope that you can put it to work right away. And feel free to contact me if you have any questions or comments. I'd love to hear from you, and all the best to you.